Good evening. I am Lisha Dore, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to One-on-One, where we bring to you some of the best minds in Trinidad and Tobago. Tonight's episode is 1 year in. How's UNC doing? Almost 1 year ago, on April 28, 2025, the UNC Coalition of Interest government took office with a clear mandate to restore security, rebuild the economy, and improve the lives of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. From the very beginning, the government hit the ground running very decisively to stabilize the country and delivered its first national budget under the theme T&T First, Building Economic Fairness Through Accountable Fiscal Policies. Now, for many citizens, a very big concern has been the cost of living, and the government has responded with targeted relief measures, which included the removal of VAT on essential food items, reducing the price of fuel, the elimination of property tax, and a 10% increase in public sector wages. Another critical priority for our country has been economic growth and job creation. And through the National Revitalization Program, a strategic initiative which featured 129 priority projects and attracted over 965 international investment submissions, the government laid the foundation for sustainable growth, thousands of new jobs, and long-term economic stability. At the same time, national security would have remained front and center. Through strengthening policing, improving intelligence coordination, enhancing border protection, and expanding community-based programs, we got a safer environment, and this would have reflected in a significant drop in serious crime, including more than a 40% drop in murders for last year. Beyond this, the government has worked to expand access to healthcare, making it more affordable, investing in education and skills training, reducing the burdens on families. So 1 year in, and the real question is this: has life truly become easier for the average citizen? And is the country moving in the right direction? So joining us tonight to answer this question is the distinguished Dr. INDERA, SAGEWAN, economist and former member of Parliament. And we were speaking to Dr. SAGEWAN and said, we just realized that she hasn't joined us on this platform for 5 months, and that is just way too long for somebody like her. So we have to make it a more regular engagement. I would like to, now on that note, let me just say we only have Dr. SAGEWAN for 1 hour, so we are ending at 9. We really, really appreciate her presence here. So we are going to try to get through this program without too much old talk, interruptions, and so on. I would like to extend a warm welcome to your viewers who are joining us on Zoom and social media, Facebook. We are live on Facebook and YouTube. Please share the lives, and of course, anyone can join us on Zoom. We are open to everybody coming on board. Members of the media who are tuning in, welcome. We are absolutely thrilled to have you here. So as I always say, one thing that differentiates us from other platforms is we allow you, the audience, to interact directly with the panelists, ask your questions, raise your concerns, and so on. So again, if you want to participate, please raise your hand and use the chats. Without further ado, I would like to now pass the mic over to my co-moderator, Dr. Donnie Rogers, who will give his opening remarks and lead off tonight's conversation.
Good evening and good night to all listeners. To you, Lisha, thank you, and to our very valued guest, Dr. SAGEWAN Ali. Thank you for being here. Now, Lisha, I just want to stray just for 1 minute and ask a very important question based on 2 things that occurred. Yesterday, now, we all know the country is very engrossed into the Parliamentary Committee that examines pharmaceuticals. right? You know, that is like one of the, if not the hottest parliamentary committee broadcast that has ever been, right? Because of what is going on now. And yesterday, the committee had to pause, and a break was announced, um, and I forgot the date in which they will reconvene, but which is 27th of this month. Sorry, I was just corrected. Um, and if you listen to the speaker's words, it was as though he was very troubled in making the announcement that the committee is going to be um, postponed for another date. And he was very, very cautious with the use of his words as in announcing that there will be a postponement. And today, via a publication from Ken Ali, a very well-known journalist, very credible journalist, he has raised certain questions. And I think based on those two things, and I'm not going to be overly speculative, but I have to ask, in light of how things have been going and the kind of things that have been unearthed, I have to ask, and the public has to wonder, has any member of that committee been prejudiced or compromised? And I think it's a very valid question, and I think the country needs to know, and I look forward to those answers. So, as we move along, aside from everything that you would have mentioned as well, there would be one thing. In the field of agriculture, we would have had increased output and between 11 to 13% reduction in prices of locally produced items for the most commonly used items. And I think that will also add to the cushion that that citizens would have benefited from as well. So aside from all the benefits that you spoke about, we also have that. But I guess there's no better person to speak about that than our guest. So without further ado, I'll just like to hand over directly to Dr. SAGEWAN Ali. Thank you for being here, and you could take it away.
Sure, thank you very much. Good night, Lisha. And I don't think we've met since you were awarded the PhD. I know we would have done, virtually, but not I have that. So let me take this opportunity to congratulate you on that accomplishment. It is no little bit of work to get to the level of having that DR in front of your name. Much deserved. I know that your commitment to public service, the growth of the economy is very strong. So, I look forward to the kind of work that you will do with this new credential behind you. Yeah. So where do we start? I mean, you've identified one of the things that you missed was the reduced price of gas, super gasoline, that benefits a majority of persons. That was another thing that through the budget, the new administration did coming into office in terms of wanting to ease the burden. Having put all of those things on the table, I think there's something that we all must be realistic to. This government came into office at a time when, the economy of Trinidad and Tobago was on its way potentially to be having to be put on life support. The situation was quite dire. The level of indebtedness that they inherited was very significant. And the official level of indebtedness was one issue. But I think when they went into office and they actually started unearthing things, they found that there was so many expenditure that had taken place based on either borrowings or sale of assets, and a lot on the basis of borrowing or using credit from suppliers, which was not paid. And the government therefore then had to, engage in crisis management really, in order to be able to stabilize the economy. And you use that word earlier. And I would say for the most part, within this year in office, the government has done a fairly decent job. They deserve to be recognized and praised for the fact that they didn't slash expenditure significantly. They maintained the level of spending at about $59 billion. They reduced, certainly at the point of delivering the budget deficit to about close to $4 billion, where we have previous years, we had deficits running into $7 billion, $9 billion. So they sought to do these things, and while at the same time try to articulate a new vision for the country. And in some instances, the government has done very well. They certainly brought a new sense of hope to the citizenry by and large, in terms of its articulation of moving towards creating jobs through new sectors, well, not new sectors, but not the non-energy areas like manufacturing, revitalization of agriculture, tourism, creative industry. So all of those things were articulated, and within the budget, they laid out clear targets that they hope to meet. We're here 1 year in, and we've not seen, or we've not heard yet a report in terms of what has been achieved in a formal, in terms of a formal statement. But there are some things that already we know are really good. So, for example, if we take the energy sector, when this government read its budget, it anticipated revenue from the energy sector to be close to $7 billion. That amounts to less than about 20% of the annual spend that the country needs. And that is moving from a place where the energy sector really at peak would contribute 60% to government's revenue. So you move the over the period of 2014 to now, the contribution of the energy sector, because of gas shortages, low price of oil and gas, etc., came down to about 20% in this reading of the budget. But since then to now, we have heard about so many projects that are potentially coming on stream that we're looking forward to, not in 2026. 2026 is going to continue to be a difficult year. But towards the end of 2027, we are going to see the supply of gas, natural gas, increase significantly. And that is going to translate into increased revenues into government coffers. And that's good news. There are new projects on stream. There's the Exxon project, which potentially, if realized its fullest, talks about 20-something billion in investment that could take place in the field of oil exploration. There is new awards to some Chinese firms for exploration of gas. There is the revitalization of the Dragon field, which we're hoping to come on stream by 2028, and I can go on. But when you look at what is going to happen, this augurs very well. So I would say to people, hold a little more strain, tighten your belts, continue to tighten your belts into 2026. But 2027, other things being held equal, because we live at a time where, change has never been as dynamic as it is now. The world, experts say, is in a polycrisis, where you have the intersection of so many variables that are negatively impacting growth. You have climate change, you have digitization, you have wars, you have globalization, you have trade wars, physical wars. There's so many things that are happening simultaneously. And the global economy is reeling from all of it. Just before the outbreak of the US Iran-Israel war, the experts were projecting that the global economy was stabilizing, which is good news for us because we depend on the global economy. They were anticipating growth of about 3%, even though not as much as we want, but solid growth. Inflation had come under control. So imported inflation is huge for us. So they were anticipating that inflation was going to settle. And then came the war, which now throws a whole set of different spokes in the wheel. There's some good news with it, but there's some not so good news with it. There's good news insofar as prices of oil and natural gas and petrochemicals will go up and we will benefit from that. But that's on the one hand. But on the other hand, we import the fuel that we use in our vehicles now at market value. So it means that cost has gone up. Whether government will continue to bear that cost or they will seek to pass it on to us is something we wait on seeing. But somebody has to bear the cost. So that's one of the negative. Another negative is things like fertilizer. The global supply of fertilizer has been impacted significantly. And Don, you will appreciate our agricultural sector. We're not organic. We depend heavily on the use of fertilizer. That shortage obviously is going to push the price of fertilizers up, which means the cost of producing is going to go up. So whether we see an erosion of that 11% drop in prices that you talk about, which I saw in the market, when I went and was very happy about it, whether that will be maintained is another story. Then we import 90% of what we consume for the most part, 90%, over $1 billion in food. If we maintain the volumes that we consume and we have to import it, then it means that we are going to need more foreign exchange in order to be able to do that. So there are so many things that are happening that this new government, just 1 year old, has to grapple with. So good news on the energy front, that's going to augur well for us in the context of what we described. Even if the war ends within the next couple of weeks, it is not going to be flick a switch to fix all the infrastructure that has been damaged, that has affected global supply. Remember, 20% of the energy of the world's global energy passes through the Strait of Hormuz. I think I pronounce it wrong. I always do. But yeah, passes through that particular strait, and that has been affected. Plus, infrastructure on the ground that supplies gas and oil has been damaged because of war. So that it's going to take time. Experts anticipate it's potentially going to take 1 to 2 years for us to see supply recalibrate. There are opportunities in there. There are opportunities for Trinidad and Tobago, for a Guyana, for a Suriname now coming on the market. Because if we can now shore up our supply, then here is opportunity for us to be able to benefit in dollars and cents from that. So, I've spoken a lot, and, maybe you all want to check into a question or something, but, I could continue talking for 1 hour nonstop, but, if there are any particular burning issues you want me to continue on, I would be happy to do so. I want to praise, as Lisha did, the revitalization plan. We haven't heard further to the announcement of the close to 1,000 expressions of interest that came in. We have not heard anything concrete roll out. I know the Minister of Works had talked about having boots on the ground before the end of the first half of the fiscal year, having boots on the ground in terms of actual, construction activity. Now, people should know that the construction sector has been on the decline. It has been contracting. And that is always a signal of economic activity. When construction is declining, that is an indication that things are not so good. When construction starts to increase, then that's a good sign. Construction has been on the decline. And now we are potentially, if we could get some of these projects going, then we could see construction, a fillip to construction. I saw a $3 billion allocation to housing, if I read correct. That is an injection into the economy, an injection into the construction sector. It is a sector that creates jobs at the fastest rate. It's a sector that spreads money through the widest and at the level of the economy that you want it to be available to ease the burden of persons, and therefore that is a good signal that is being sent. Some of the targets set for non-energy diversification, I'm not sure where they are. So, for example, the budget has spoken, Donnie, to almost $800 million allocated for modernization, for modern agriculture. I'm not sure where the ministry is with respect to that, but certainly it would be worthwhile for us to hear where we are with respect to that. Because I think, Donnie, just the mere sense of hope and the sense that people feel that things are happening, that all our eggs are not being sunk in one basket, is one of the things that cause the agricultural sector to kind of, start a flourish again, because farmers are, I think, the most resilient, and they're the ones who we can always rely on. During COVID, it's our farmers who continue to feed us when we couldn't get supplies from abroad. They stepped up. And I think in this current situation, they again have stepped up in response to all the positivism, the amount of acreages of land that has been awarded where persons have actually gotten their deeds. And it took forever for that to happen, but we saw an acceleration of that taking place under this current administration. So those are some of the good things. I know nobody likes increased taxes. Unfortunately, the budget spoke to some taxes that people are not happy about, some sin taxes on alcohol and cigarettes, the introduction of the landlord surcharge, taxes on insurance, levies on insurance companies and banks, etc. But the bottom line is the government doesn't grow money on trees, and they have to find money from somewhere. And I thought what they attempted to do was to balance where they sought to take the money from. And, the things like alcohol and cigarettes, some people are complaining that, that is people's avenue for relieving stress. But, oh God, that's not a good avenue to relieve stress. And they talked about bars closing down, etc., etc. But the money has to come from somewhere. So I'm saying that people needed to have maybe the government could have done a better job at selling these things, leveling more, I think, with the population, in terms of what the financial situation of the country is. And therefore, we're doing this not because we want to do it, but because we have to do it. And I think maybe people would have been more willing to accept that. The increase in the fuel cost that was levied on manufacturing, on energy manufacturers, was one, that created some amount of negative press. But again, at the end of the day, the money has to come from somewhere.
So I would just like to say that what the government inherited came after 10 years of general, when you look at it from a statistical point of view, of general declining figures.
So I can tell you in that 10-year period, we had consecutive negative growth. Only one year we had positive growth was in 2022, and that was because of the Ukraine-Russian war that pushed the price of oil and gas up. And we realized some positive growth because of that little injection that took place, but not because, and I mean, this is something that, we kept lamenting. The past administration kept only focused on the Dragon gas as the only project, as the be-all and end-all of our survival. Very, very little was done in any other sector. Just to make the point, this government, within the first year, the yachting sector, which I've been talking about ad nauseam over 20 years, within this first year, something that the previous administrations, now it has to be plural, for all over 30 years, weren't able to do, move us from yachts having to fill 15 forms. So one harmonized form, they did it within a year. They put down a port. Is it not a port? A health clearinghouse in Chagaramas that the sector is extremely happy about. So these are initiatives that cost the government nothing, just a stroke of a pen, but that can result in us seeing the inflow of yachts from abroad. They come, they spend 6 months, they come, they stay, they spend foreign exchange, we earn foreign exchange through this mechanism. So again, another win for this government within this first year.
And I actually met the person who was responsible for putting that sort of one-pass system in place. And when I met him, I thought about you because I remember how much you actually spoke about this issue. And you draw the reference of, young guys could come and earn 100, 150 euros a day easy, and that is an inflow of US dollars at the ground level, So, I mean, exactly what you're saying there, and what I started on talking about, when you have 10 years of basically stagnation and negative growth, nothing sustainable can come out from a knee-jerk reaction. And I think after a year to say anything other than, there has been definite signs of stability, will be expecting, in my humble opinion, a little bit too much too soon, because we cannot go on windfalls. We have to look at sustainable initiatives, and we have to look at rebuilding the economy from a sustainable point of view. Nothing sustainable could happen overnight. And especially in the context of declined revenues, you cannot afford to do spending and developmental spending and capex based on unsustainable projects and ideas. So these things take time, and maybe people don't understand that, but these things will take time. And I agree, maybe the communication could have been a little bit better in that regard. But at the end of the day, I think the government's focus has been sustainability. With one of the issues that you raised there about housing, it was 11 companies that got a total of $3.4 billion in housing contracts. And that's good because, you're seeing $3.4 billion spread over 11 companies, right? That necessarily was not really the case before. You would have, just maybe one or two, just a handful of, companies benefiting. But it's nice to see that in the first issuance of contracts, you've seen 11 companies getting that kind of thing, so you're really seeing an approach that is meant to be equitable and fair. Yes, there's the argument that there is only one company that has credible experience in it, but at the same time, that is the company that got the most amount or the lion's share of the budget. So it commensurates, right? Because we can't put all our eggs in one basket and give it to one company. Then that will be unfair, right? And how do we develop capacity, right? So that was just my thoughts on basically what you said there. Lisha, do you have anything to say?
Yes, I want to come in. Well, first of all, I want to tell our viewers we only have Dr. SAGEWAN until 9 p.m. So if anybody wants to ask a question, make a contribution, please, let's just do it, right? Now, I want to thank Dr. SAGEWAN for her very comprehensive overview of what has been taking place, particularly with the economy over the last 12 months. And I am getting from Dr. SAGEWAN that more or less she's satisfied with the fiscal policies that have been implemented, right? Now, one of the areas that concerns our citizens is job creation, right? And I know another thing you are very passionate about is the diversification of the economy, because we have had many conversations with you on this program about that, right? So the two questions I really would like to ask, right? On the topic of job creation, what should we realistically expect in terms of job creation within the next year? I get it. Yeah, people, yes, we in Trinidad and Tobago want things to happen yesterday, and that is not realistic. And I want to disagree that the government has not been clear in communicating this, because they keep saying we can't get results, the sort of results that people are looking for overnight. It's going to take time. And they have said that over and over again. But I do want to ask, right? Because job creation is something that is very close to the heart and minds of our citizens. Many of them are saying they need jobs, or they need better jobs, they need more income coming into the household. What should we realistically expect in terms of job creation within the next year? That's one of my questions. And question number two, and I know this is something that is very close to Dr. SAGEWAN, are we seeing real diversification on the horizon?
So yeah, two good questions. The issue of job creation, which really is linked very heavily to the issue of diversification. But I just want to say to you, it's not about, when I say better communication, I don't mean in terms of expectations, I mean in terms of where the burden, because obviously you are imposing burden. And I feel that, calling in the business sector, for example, and saying, listen, this is the situation. You have enjoyed this benefit for a very long time. The government can no longer afford to subsidize energy at the level of which it has to be removed. How can we work together to implement it in a way that, that can best, so that the negative press that it brought because it was just imposed could have been avoided? That is the kind of things that I'm talking about. And, simple things, but certainly in terms of people's but people, we're all human beings. If I don't have a job, and, government talk about on the platform are going to generate X amount of thousands of jobs, whatever, I have an expectation that as soon as you come into power, you're going to be able to turn a switch on and it's going to happen. And obviously not realistic, right? Job creation, I agree with you. Job creation, in my view, should be at the center of everything economics that we do in this country. Whether we talk diversification, whether we talk about revitalization of energy, whether we talk about transition into renewable energy, whatever we do, we have to think about job creation. And what puts an additional spoke in that goal and objective, Lisha, is the issue of AI and the rate at which artificial intelligence is replacing human beings in jobs. And as we talk about the world of the future, we have to take stock of this intervention, and we have to sit down and sit back for a minute and decide how are we going to mitigate the onslaught of artificial intelligence, while at the same time embracing its positive elements in a way that we ensure we could create jobs for the odd 600,000 people that form the labor force in this country. You know, we as economists, we lament the unemployment rate that we hear, and we quote it because it comes from CSO, but we all know that is not the real unemployment rate. And if you look at unemployment in pockets of community, it is significantly higher than the estimated 3% that we get overall, that the CSO tells us is the level of unemployment. There are a lot of people, there are a lot of young professionals who are coming out, doctors, lawyers, engineers, and there are no jobs for them. And whereas a lot of them looked at leaving the country and going elsewhere, the world has changed so much that it is not so simple anymore for them to just pack up their jaji bundle, as we say, and go off somewhere and be able to find a job. That's becoming more and more difficult. So as we continue to train people, we have to be doing the things that is necessary in order to generate the jobs. So let's take energy. We have a revitalization of the energy sector, let's say by next year, going into the next year. But at its peak, the energy sector only directly employs 3% of our labor force. So the energy sector is not in itself going to solve the unemployment problem, solve the job creation problem. The job creation problem has to be solved through diversification, through diversifying the economic base of this country. And I was really very heartened when this government came into office, and it articulated a very strong focus on non-energy diversification, where the Prime Minister talked about a cluster of ministries comprising the Minister of Finance, Planning, and Trade and Investment and Tourism, that going to form the hub of ministers that are going to be responsible for transforming sectors such as manufacturing, tourism, create industries, maritime services, all the pockets within tourism, like health tourism, sport tourism, culinary tourism, festival tourism, all of these areas, right? And even the budget, when it was read, spoke a lot about. In fact, the budget, I have it right, some of it open, talked about training 1,000 export-ready SMEs to enter the market. It talks about generating jobs. It talked about $3 billion investment in tourism over the next 2 years and $9 billion investment over the next 5 years. These are targets which, if we are able to come anywhere close to, would be able to generate non-energy jobs. And if we are very strategic in terms of how we define where we want to play in these different areas, we can ensure that the jobs we create are sustainable ones, where we can see people not just making up beds and cleaning rooms, but moving up the economic ladder in terms of the higher value opportunities. So if I could give you an example, we should focus on community-based tourism, for example. We want to spread the employment opportunity of tourism. And that is one of the fastest growing areas of global tourism, where more and more tourists want to come and have a unique experience within communities. They don't want to come and eat KFC, They want to come and they want to go and have that cocoa experience. They want to eat in the cocoa bowl. They want to dance the cocoa. They want to have that immersive experience. And there are some countries in the region that's doing it. Dominica, case in point, that is really focused on creating these kind of authentic experiences. And we have a lot of, when you look, for example, at a lot of the local tour operators, and they are showcasing Trinidad and Tobago to us in terms of what we have. We have a lot of natural advantages that we can work with in order to build the product. But we have to build the products. We have to build it in conjunction with the stakeholders, and simultaneously we have to engage in the global marketing to bring people here. You know, people ask me all the time, so now given what's happening with Iran, I think maybe more tourists will come our way. And that's so simple, because the impact of that is high inflation, reducing spending power, increased cost of travel. All of these things doesn't necessarily translate into more people coming our way. More people will come our way if we are strategic about it and we develop the capacity to do that. Already we have a manufacturing sector, small, non-energy manufacturing, that's cutting edge, that uses state-of-the-art technology, that generates significant jobs. They need support. They need government to work together with them in order to be able to expand and grow the economy. They are significantly challenged by the foreign exchange situation of the country, but hopefully by next year we'll see improvement of that as we earn more revenue through oil and gas. But when we can't then just become complacent, and that's a fear that I have, a real fear that I have. 1 year into the game, my expectation is that we would have actually had a strategic plan, a non-energy diversification strategic plan that outlined what it would look like. You know how the diversification plan, we saw these 3 divisions of all the infrastructure that we would find in the country. My expectation is that I would have seen a 3D of agriculture, what agriculture in the next 5 years would look like, because that is what investors want to see in order to come. They want to see what your vision as a country is for agriculture. Where do you want to take it in order to make a decision? Is this a place I want to invest? In tourism, they want to see that. If you I always come back to the Dubai example, making a decision we want to play with the 1% of the world. They're the people we want to bring. And therefore, they set out to create products that would attract that 1% of the world that will always have disposable income, will always have extra spending. And they did it in such creative ways, creating indoor ski resorts in a desert island, replicating, islands of countries of the world. Every building that they put up is a tourism attraction. Everything is about the tourism experience. From the time you land, even before you land, from the time you board the plane in the other country, it is an experience that you want to develop. And we need to get all hands on board. We need customs to understand the role they play. We need immigration. We need port authority. We need all police. We need everybody to understand that you're an ambassador. You are a tourist ambassador, and how you treat people is going to determine whether they come back. We don't just want them coming for carnival. They're going to take any crap during carnival because they know what they're coming for, right? So they ain't go and complain. But the rest of the year, they're coming for an experience. They want to make sure that they do. So I'm disappointed, but I'm hopeful that it's being done. It's on its way. This diversification plan that really points to the direction of where we're going, because we need foreign direct investment to come in to furnish that. We need local investors to be incentivized, not just to be invested in Guyana and in Barbados. We want them to keep their money here and reinvest. And that's not happening right now. Loans to business for investment is relatively flat in Trinidad. It's been that way for quite a while, but they are investing. They are investing elsewhere. So there are things like that we need to be able to change the dynamic so that we can see that kind of investment happening again. The revitalization plan, as I keep saying, is the hardware. What we need now is the software. We need the developmental plan that goes hand in hand with that to make sure that those investments don't become white elephants on us, where we build out all of this infrastructure and then people don't come because we don't put things in place to make them come. People are not just going to come and buy high-rise apartments on the San Fernando waterfront if there are not things for them to do when they come, if they don't feel a sense of safety. And we've not even talked about crime. And while, yes, we have seen repeatedly state of emergency, while the government has partnered with the US, which is something that I heavily support, because Clearly, we can't do it ourselves. Clearly, CARICOM can't help us with it. And we need a strategic partner that have the means and the resources and the technology, the manpower, etc., to help us do it. But still, 1 year into the year, and we are nowhere where we need to be with respect to bringing crime under control in order to make it happen. Lisha, I don't know if I've answered your question. The budget spoke about lots of targets in terms of employment, but again, growth is the issue. It's a chicken and egg situation. If you have growth, you don't have the money to be able to generate employment. But if you don't have the kind of vision and plans to attract the investment, it's not going to come. So, it's really putting all the pieces of the pie together and presenting it in a way that's going to incentivize and excite people to want to come and want to invest.
I would just like to input there. When we look at job creation, I think with the mere factor of the announcement of $3.4 billion in housing projects given to these 11 companies, we will see that impacting demand on the street, who are the tradesmen, who are the laborers and stuff like that. And we agree that the construction sector has really been flat for a long time. This is probably the most major announcement in over the last 10 years, I would say, or 5 years or so, with regards to housing. And we all know housing projects and construction projects in the construction sector is the one sector that impacts the man on the street, because that is where the laborers and the tradesmen are. So I think we would see some alleviation in that regard within the next 6 to 9 months as these projects, get kicked off. And, with these things, from the readings that I've done so far, they are going to be held time bound.
Yeah, but right? just remember though, Donnie, right? The construction, building out of houses, it's finite. It has a life. It will come to an end unless you're continually injecting money in the sector, right? So we need that because short term, we need to be able to generate the short-term jobs with Simon. But more importantly, we have to put our minds to the long-term sustainable jobs. Those are not going to come from the energy sector. We're going to get the money from the energy sector. But we have to build out the sectors, the growth sectors that will generate these long-term sustainable jobs.
In my respectful view, agriculture has always been synonymous with sustainability. And that is all I will say on this. I don't want to get started.
I know, but Donnie, as we both know, right? The world has gone so far that, young people won't be interested in break back agriculture. They don't go and do, for the most part, open field agriculture, beating the sun. Plus, there's climate change and the deleterious impact that climate change has had. Crops, their memories are screwed up. They don't know when to bear. They don't know how much. So you can't even predict yields because of climate change. So there's so many issues. Flood, we're islands, seawater encroaching on arable land. So we have to, when we talk about agriculture and food, we have to talk about a new approach to agriculture. It has to be technology-based agriculture. So, and individually, and I'm sure you know, even I'm sure what you're doing yourself, to a large extent, is based on this new kind of approach to agriculture. Yes. And we're seeing pockets of people doing it. Like, I was really the example of all these interesting mushrooms that I'm seeing when I go into the supermarket shelf and nicely packaged. And I'm always amazed when I pick up the package and I see, my God, it's made in Trinidad, it's grown in Trinidad. Yeah. And when it sits next to the imported product, and price-wise, it's competitive.
Correct.
Quality in terms of how it looks and presents. And I know this is a lot fresher than the thing was imported from wherever that has probably taken months to get here. So there are things that are happening that need support, and we need to create clusters of activity. So if mushrooms is something that we see we have a natural potential, and this is something that can impact import substitution. Because you can see us not importing what we're currently importing. It is something, if we produce it at scale, can lead to canning and agro-processing, or it could lead to export. We have the Caribbean region as our first a market we already are familiar with, and we export it. We could be producing export, but one or two people doing it can't give us the kind of volumes and the scale and the reliability of supply that is needed. So government's role is to find these pockets of activities that are naturally happening and to to work with these pockets of industry to expand it, to incentivize it, and to assist it to be able to expand and grow. And we can't be everything to everybody. So nobody ever think we could just move from importing $1 billion of food to importing zero. That's never going to happen. We are an island. We could never produce all we need. But if we can generate the foreign exchange in order to pay for the things we can't produce, then that is the ideal. Earning foreign exchange in order to buy what you don't have is really one of the ultimate objectives of the development agenda.
When you look at the food import bill at being 7.3, and when you analyze what we import versus what we can produce here, and the items that we are producing here that we are importing that we're not traditionally doing here, when we take those things into consideration, I think with a proper plan and over time, and this is over a 5-year period, we could bring that food import bill down to about 4.5, which in my opinion is realistic and manageable and acceptable.
But the government does have a target. Following on the CARICOM target, they have reducing the food import bill by 25% by 2030.
Yes.
So it does set up, but so it therefore begs the question: what is being done? Because setting a target is good. CARICOM great at setting targets. They're not very good at achieving it. So implementation is the thing. So we need to see. Yes, the goals are very noble and very, very exciting, but we need to see what is being done in order to translate activities into realizing the goal.
Yeah, I agree. I fully agree with that position.
I have plenty of things I would like to touch on, but we won't be able to touch on it today. Like, for example, one of the things I would have liked to discuss is our government policy really reaching the most vulnerable in the country. That's one of the things I would like to
But, I mean, I don't have data. I mean, it's not an area that I study, but I do want to say that I feel that the government has been very deliberate since coming into office to ensure that it is targeting the most vulnerable. I mean, it is not to say that they are achieving the objective. I mean, I don't know Minister Vandana Mohib, very well, but I feel she's one of those people who have just kind of bend her head down and focus on what her assignment is, and is really just about the business of addressing the issues in the country that can bring relief to the most vulnerable. So from that perspective, but that is treating the problem to a transfer mechanism. And people don't understand what I mean. It means government budget. Over 50% of government's budget is money that is simply the government transferring it to those who are not able, or different sectors, right? Now, that's not the ideal situation. In the short term, yes, you have to provide cushion, and you must do that. But what I would like to see over the next couple of years, that we roll out sustainable programs, that those who are currently enjoying the benefit from government transfers, we spend some time thinking through how we can incorporate them into the productive sectors and create opportunities where they can move from getting the handout to actually earning. And, and it may be some things that we do at a community level, where we have a lot of, like, for example, a community where you have a lot of young mothers, for example, who can't work because they have young children, maybe building out in pockets of community daycare centers, where you use some of those very mothers to be able to train them and allow them to be the people who are working. So they're able to be there, look after their own children, children of other people, while at the same time earn income to feed them, and free up other young single mothers who can now go into the job place, access education part-time, work part-time, etc. So, those I would like assist. This is something that I feel passionate about and been talking about for a long time, but really moving how we define success in social transfer. Governments tend to define it by allocating more and more money to it and increasing numbers of people that they benefit from it. And instead, I think we need a measurement where we speak about how much people we transition out of these programs and into some sort of productive activity. And there will always be that pocket of persons Lisha, who will not be able to be merged in, but it will reduce the amount of persons who will need the direct transfer. But it also increases the capacity of the state to deal with them in a manner that gives them a more livable standard of living and existence rather than just scraping by. So there's a lot of work to be done, you know, and I mean, I come back to the minister. So she's young, she's full of energy, and here is to me an exciting challenge that you know, I hope over the next couple of years I see her pick up and really run with it in terms of transforming. And I offer her through this program, if she wants to have a conversation and she needs help, please, I would love to share my ideas and thoughts in this area. But this is very important and go hand in hand with the issue of sustainable development.
Yes, there's plenty things that I would like to talk about, but we're really running out of time. It is 8:54. I want to ask one final question. I'm not seeing anyone raising their hand, but that is because Dr. SAGEWAN covers things so thoroughly, you know. The final question I would like to ask is, what should the citizens be looking or watching out for in the next year then? What should be our top priorities?
Okay, so like I say, for the rest of this year, I would say that we need to be very conservative with our expectations. Conservative with our expectation, but hopeful for what the future will bring. Because I think a lot that has already been put in train by the government is going to yield good results into 2027 and going for others. Now, remember, I know our crystal ball, right? So that is making the assumption that that a pandemic doesn't hit or some crazy something that we don't have control over doesn't strike us down, right? So I'm saying with that kind of assumption in place, other things being held equal, the war in Russia, Ukraine, they arrive at some settlement, and we see reasonableness in the world economy. I think that, you know, we can look for it. So as I'm saying, be conservative in how you manage your pocket over this year. Cook more, buy less, although I know that the food vendors would like us to buy more. And I want to say there's a pitch for them. In this country, you could buy food real cheap, good food, you know, already prepared. If you have a family of 2 people or 3 people, it's not expensive. Once you don't want to eat in a fancy restaurant, it is not expensive to get food almost around every corner. So that sector to me is one that really supports this. But again, be wise in terms of how you spend your money. I know a lot of people, especially professional people, tell me they don't have time to go to the market. Well, I go to the market and I'm a professional person. You know, I allocate my sometimes, and I've discovered. So I was a Sunday morning market vendor, right? Market purchaser, right? Every Sunday, but I go late in order to get the deals, as I've told people all the time. However, I have just discovered if I go during the week, like midweek, like around a Thursday, I could get almost everything I get on the Sunday at really good prices. This is a Tuna Puna market, right? My pitch for Tuna Puna market. So I've recently, and it's so much easier because I could get a parking right in front of the market. So I don't have to park down the road and long walk. And I could just walk in very casually. It's not crowded and I could buy all the things. You know, food prep. I mean, there's so many videos showing you how to food prep. Food prep and organize yourself so that cooking becomes easier. Take a weekend and cook enough for the entire week. You would be amazed at how much money you save and how much good food you have for yourself and your family. In Trinidad and Tobago, even under the circumstances of economic difficulties that we live in, we can still enjoy a very decent standard of living. We can still enjoy, you know, the beaches, try the recreational things that's not going to cost you money. Take the kids to the park and have a picnic and let them fly some kite and play some cricket or play some football. Do things that are going to be stress relieving, but it's not going to cost you. And that is my advice. But I do feel that the government has gotten off to a good start. I know there's been a lot of controversy aimed at our Prime Minister, which I think has been very, very unfair. I feel very strongly that if she were a man, a lot of it would not be aimed at her. Sorry, Donnie, but I feel that is a a reality.
No, I agree.
But she has shown
Very
herself.
true.
She has shown herself to be a warrior woman. She has shown herself willing against all the odds to stand up. And we know we didn't talk about CARICOM and you may not, but I think her stance on CARICOM has been very good. I have an article in the newspaper today. I'm sure I'm telling you,
I saw that today. Yeah,
it's worth a read. CARICOM needs shaking up. CARICOM needs to deliver so that the entire region can benefit more from its existence. To me, CARICOM has really just become an event where heads of government go and they have a nice retreat. I mean, you imagine we talking about T-shirt, which is not very attractive, by the way, and boat rides and all of these things. And we are not complaining about the fact that the reappointment of the CARICOM Secretary General was not a line item in the main part of the heads of government meeting at which our Prime Minister was present. She decided she didn't want to go on a retreat. And you don't even in the retreat, you didn't have it as a line item. You had it camouflaged under something called General and Finance or something. And she was supposed to read people's minds to know that it would have been handled under that. No, I do not agree with that. And I think she's justified in the shake-up. And bottom line is, we are the major financial contributor to CARICOM. And who is going to step in and fill that role? So when everybody starts to jump up and anything come out of their mouths, they are speaking. You know, we should be worried. Why aren't we worried about the fact that a former head of state, former Prime Minister of St. Vincent and Grenadine, speaks publicly about private information that happened at that heads of government meeting and is boasting that he has good insider information and speaks it publicly? That should worry us. We shouldn't be putting that out news as a bombshell that we want to celebrate. No, that is wrong. That's absolutely wrong. Private. So basically, we're saying at the level of the heads of government, what happens in that room, in that conversation, it shouldn't just stay there, and it should be just anybody know it and say. And this doesn't seem to worry us. Instead, we want to have all kinds of nonsensical debate over it. And I feel strongly about this, as you often tell, and I know I myself may have carried myself. Oh, it's 9 on the dot, but you know, I've been happy to be here, and you know, happy to be back anytime you all are interested in having me once I have the time. But I am saying that, you know, let us be a little bit more patriotic, and let us hold hands with government where we see them going wrong. Let us call them out, because no institution is perfect, no man is perfect. Let us still be prepared. I will still be prepared to hold them to account when I feel like I say, I expected the diversification plan already. 1 year in the game, it should have been here. I am disappointed that it's not. I'm not going to be afraid to say that. But then on the other hand, what they have done good, I am prepared to say and support very strongly.
All right, thank you so much for that, Donnie. We are closing up, you know, so if you have any final...
So I'll be quick. I will agree that the government started out right. I will say that we are seeing the results, and nothing sustainable comes from a knee-jerk reaction. After 10 years, we are now heading out of the dark. Let this not be about politics, who like who, and let's face the statistical facts and data and understand where we are and where we are going. Thank you, INDERA, for being here. It is always a pleasure.
Most welcome.
Well, I just want to end by echoing some of the sentiments expressed by Dr. SAGEWAN. Be conservative but hopeful. The government has gotten off to a good start, and the future does indeed look bright for Trinidad and Tobago. So, Dr. SAGEWAN, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you so much. It's not going to take 5 months to get you back.
No worries.
Yes. Right, but we hope to have you more regularly on the program. Thank you so much for joining us, sharing your insights, giving us some good practical life advice. I'm going to take it. I'm going to go to the market on Thursday.
You all might bounce up.
Yeah, we might bounce up. And another little bit of free advice, you know, things that are perishable, cut it up and put it in the freezer. And then you have it lasts longer, you know. Don't wait, don't let your money be. I have got to the point where I literally check the number of cucumbers I need to last me. And I buy it. So it's not a case if I go and I just see things cheap. I buy it. I stop and I say, okay, am I going to use it? You know, when am I going to use it? if I'm not going to use it in that time, can I store it in a way that I could use it at a later time? So all of those things, and I engage my thought processes. I don't just speak economics, I live it. I really, really, I live it. So, when I share advice, it's what I do myself.
And thanks, of course, to all the viewers who joined us and members of the media. We're so happy to have you all here. There's a regular group that comes on every week, and we really appreciate that. So on that note, I don't want to keep Dr. SAGEWAN any longer. Let me just say, stay safe, Trinidad and Tobago, and tune in again next week, Tuesday at 8 p.m. for another episode of One on One. Thank you and good night.
Have a good night, everyone.